Hello, I'm Fiona Schreier, and welcome to the first episode of In the Scenes. Before we get into our larger conversation, I'll be giving you some updates on what's happening in the film industry. Awards season is kicking off as a series of film festivals take place around the globe. At the Venice International Film Festival, Spanish director Pedro Almodovar's first English-language film, The Room Next Door, won the Golden Lion, while director Brady Corbet won the Silver Lion for directing The Brutalist. At Telluride Film Festival, Saoirse Ronan won the Silver Medallion for her performance in The Outrun, while Jacques Audiard won for directing Emilia Perez. Festival season continues with the Toronto International Film Festival and the upcoming New York Film Festival, where much-hyped films like Conclave, Anora, and Blitz are screening before hitting theaters later this fall. Unlike last year, where Barbie and Oppenheimer stood out during the summer, this year has many more smaller films that have yet to be released. We'll see what hits with audiences in the upcoming months. Speaking of upcoming films, the trailer for The Apprentice, directed by Ali Abbasi, dropped on September 10th. The film, which premiered at the Cannes Film Festival earlier this year, tracks the early years of Donald Trump, played by Sebastian Stan, as a businessman under the guidance of Roy Cohn, played by Jeremy Strong, a controversial prosecutor known for his role in the McCarthy hearings. The film had struggled to find U.S. distribution after its Cannes premiere, as it faced threats of legal retaliation from Trump due to its portrayal of his unsavory business decisions and treatment of his ex-wife, Ivana Trump. But it got picked up by Briarcliff Entertainment last month and is set for release on October 10th. This trailer drop felt particularly pointed as it came on the night of the presidential debate. In sadder news, on September 9th, famed actor James Earl Jones passed away at age 93. In a career that spanned decades and mediums, Jones was known for bringing gravitas and charisma to his performances. Perhaps most known for low, steady voice work as Darth Vader in Star Wars and Mufasa in The Lion King, Jones was also celebrated for his performances on stage, starring in Othello, King Lear, and Fences, for which he won his second Tony Award, leading to a Broadway theater being renamed after him in 2022. He broke boundaries as an African-American actor, portraying his characters with a dignified, moral center, no matter the circumstances surrounding them. He left a powerful legacy that we will remember for years. That's all I've got for today. Thank you for listening, and here is Asher Thompson and Jamie Bass.
Thanks, Fiona. I'm Asher.
I'm Jamie.
And this is
In the Scenes,
where we break down aspects of filmmaking through the films we love. What are we talking about today, Jamie?
Today we're going to be talking about film directing, which is the highest possible job in a filmmaking system.
What do you do as a director?
Well, directors call the shots. They tell the camera where to go, they tell the actors what to do, and they're in charge of pretty much everyone on a film set.
Sounds stressful.
So, yeah, it is pretty stressful. I've been in that position sometimes. So today we have both chosen two films, and we're going to talk about both of the films and their directorial instincts, both from very distinct, different directors.
Mm-hmm. What film are you talking about?
Today I will be talking about The Handmaid, directed by Park Chan-Wook. What movie are you going to be talking about?
I'm going to be talking about Mulan Rouge by Baz Luhrmann.
Awesome. Who's going to go first?
I'd like to go first if you don't mind.
But I want to go first.
Fine.
No, you go first.
Okay. So, Mulan Rouge is a fantastic film about a writer who's in love with a dancer. And if you haven't seen it, you should. It's fantastic. But the thing about Baz Luhrmann's style is it's incredibly... How would you phrase his style?
Crazy Town.
Crazy Town, Banana Pants.
Going to Crazy Town on the Sugar Express.
I'd say so.
Yeah.
The film... It jumps between the craziest thing you've ever seen and the craziest people you've ever seen and like the most gut-wrenching, heart-aching, melodramatic thing you've ever seen on camera. And I think a lot of that comes from, a lot of people don't know this, but Baz Luhrmann has a lot of experience directing operas for the theater. Mm-hmm. And around the time where he was coming up with the idea for Mulan Rouge, he was in India working on an opera of A Midsummer Night's Dream, and he started to get into Bollywood film, which has these it's, as he described it, the lowest comedy and then the most overactive, melodramatic scenes you've ever seen played out so much emotion goes into it, but so much laughter as well. And they're like 3 hours long, and they burst into song. And he said, "Can I bring this to the West?" And I think he did it because Mulan Rouge is a really good example of that. And you can see a lot of the influences of Bollywood film in his style. A lot of that comes down to the cutting room floor, where it's these very punchy cuts from one place to another. He has this crazy way to jump from tragedy to comedy like so quickly. This movie starts with the writer character, played by Ewan McGregor, talking about how he fell in love with a dancer played by Nicole Kidman. Then she died, and he'll never be okay again. And
it's really Shakespearean in that way, where like at this beginning, it's sort of like, here's how the story's going to shake out, but you're going to sit through and enjoy the ride anyways.
And then he flashes back to when he moved into his apartment, and he's in the apartment for 5 minutes, and an unconscious Argentinian falls through his ceiling. And instantly we're into slapstick comedy. We're into like Johnny Test-esque sound effects, every like motion and gesture. And John Leguizamo plays a really good role in bringing the silly
about like
to the
2
movie.
feet shorter than he actually should be, which
Which
I don't know how they did.
they accomplished
I have
it
no
with
clue.
like prosthetic legs that were CGI'd to look like he was a smaller man.
So he wasn't walking on his knees.
He was on his knees, but they had a little robot thing to help him.
Oh,
In fact, a lot of the movie is done with an interesting collaboration with green screen, which a lot of directors were scared to try. Something Baz Luhrmann worked on a lot in Mulan Rouge, and he's done it a lot in Elvis, is like these large CGI set pieces. And there's a moment in Mulan Rouge where we're being introduced to the building, the Mulan Rouge, and we see these awful city streets, and the camera's swinging through this CGI set that I learned was accomplished using miniatures, CGI renderings, and matte paintings to create the illusion that we're flying through these cities. And then as we're flying through, we stop on these close-ups of these people talking straight to the camera that are superimposed using green screen right on top of that. And it's bizarre, and it looks insane, and the technology wasn't there, but the drive was, and so it's got charm because of it anyway, even though it doesn't look great.
It definitely looks like a movie that was made in 2001, 2002, early 2000s.
Yeah.
But it does have that sort of, like you said, that drive and the sort of artistic expression behind it.
It's too charming for you to care.
It doesn't make it feel like, oh, this hack is doing something I hate.
Yeah.
You know?
And he goes back into a lot of the Bollywood influence in these large dance sequences. When we first enter the Mulan Rouge with Christian, the writer character, and his new like troupe of Bohemians, it's bizarre and overwhelming, and Jim Broadbent has the biggest mustache and top hat you've ever seen, and it's all flashy, and there's a cut like every third of a second, and you're in one place and you're in another place, and songs are playing, and now another song's playing, and they're all hits on the radio in the early 2000s and the late 90s, and it's bizarre juxtaposed over like the 1899 setting. And then suddenly the stage clears from the can. Nicole Kidman descends from the ceiling and has this incredibly grasping moment where she's performing like Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. And she's on this huge swing set that's super high in the air. I learned today she broke ribs twice shooting that sequence, and like tore cartilage in her knee. It was awful. She like hurt herself so badly to do this, but it just goes to show like how over the top Baz Luhrmann was trying to make everything he was doing. And then he did the same Bollywood inspiration with a lot of these huge set pieces, like the giant building that's just an elephant in the middle of this garden, where we have these bizarre scenes play out. Like, there's a lot of slapstick comedy. There's a lot of misunderstanding where Nicole Kidman's character thinks that Ewan McGregor's writer character is some rich aristocrat that's going to swoop in and save them and make her a big-time actress, but the real Duke that's there to fund the theater is this awful little weasel of a man that's just around the corner all the time. And we get these beautiful moments between Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman, followed by these crazy fast-paced sequences, followed by, like, there's a scene where the awful little whiskered rat Duke guy tries to rape Nicole Kidman, and then he gets knocked out by another guy, and the next morning he wakes up and Jim Broadbent's like, oh, she was saving you for her wedding night because you make her feel like a virgin. And then they launch into Like a Virgin by Madonna. And it's insane. It's...
I hadn't had experience with this movie before you showed it to me for this show.
Did you know what you were getting into?
I didn't know what I had an idea, but I was like, I was not ready. I don't think anyone can truly be ready for how insane this movie is, because it's like, it is just like full-on crazy town, but it somehow like makes you cry at the end.
And however polarizing the sound you think the soundtrack is going to be, it gets even stranger when
it's
you
like,
experience it.
You know, there's turning something to 11, this turns it to like 14.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy.
Mulan
It's one of the
Rouge.
most opulent movies I've ever seen. Like,
I'd say it's opulent.
I would also say it's opulent, because I just said it. It just looks like it looks really expensive.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Mulan Rouge, opulent. So Jamie, tell me about this handmaiden business.
So, The Handmaid set in 1930s South Korea during the Japanese occupation, and it follows this lowly pickpocketer named Suki, who is hired by this other swindler who's posing as a count, and his job to her is to infiltrate this bizarrely expensive home run by this absolutely like insane guy in order to make his lady-in-waiting fall in love with the count character.
And the house's design is like English Gothic architecture combined with like Japanese
flourishes, because the guy who owns this house is like the biggest weeaboo of all time, and he's Korean but he hates himself, so he's like, Korea is ugly, Japan is beautiful. So it's like, it's a really interesting mix of, you know, like you said, English architecture and Japanese architecture, and the production design is on the forefront. And you spend a lot of time in this house, and there's a lot of just beautiful shots of this sweeping house. There's actually, like, when the Suki character is going to the mansion for the first time, there's that one joke where they ride up to the gate and she starts getting her things, and the driver's like, no, don't worry, the house is very far away. You'll still have a lot of time to sleep. So yeah, it's just like this, it sort of like has a sort of like Much Ado About Nothing sort of premise, in that like this character has to make this character fall in love with this character, but it quickly, after the first act, it quickly does away with that and morphs into something that I would say is like a lot more playful, a lot more interesting, and it's really dark but really funny.
Yeah.
And it's all about sort of emancipation, just trying to save this woman from this absolute awful place that she lives in. It's directed by Park Chan-Wook, who is a really like established Korean auteur. He started out making movies, and the first 2 movies he made were really bad. And those aren't my words, those are his words. He says that he's glad nobody knows that he made those movies. But then he became a critic, and then came back to direct this movie, Joint Security Area. It was one of the most seen movies in Korea at the time, and that sort of like put him on the map. Now he can make whatever he wants. And you know, a couple films later, he gets this film called Old Boy, and this is the one that truly puts him on the map, because it plays at the Cannes Film Festival and it gets the 2nd place honor. We watched Old Boy in preparation for the show. For those who don't know, it is a like pretty standard revenge movie until it isn't. It's sort of tonally strange. What did you had a fun time with that movie, right?
I would describe it as psychically damaging.
Yeah,
I thought it was very well done.
that's true.
It hurt my feelings in my heart, and not in a nice way.
You know, he makes that movie, and that sort of like establishes him as this guy to like watch out for. And so fast forward about 10, 15 years, and he makes his film, The Handmaiden. Something I really love about Park's style is that his narratives are always really, they're always really challenging, but really fun in like a playful way.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's some of the most like grotesque stuff I've seen in movies are in his movies, but he counteracts it with a really good sense of dark humor that I think is really unique, and it makes him really unique.
One of the greatest physical gags I think I've
There's
seen
a great
in years.
gag involving a rope and a tree, and yeah, it is dark, but it is really funny, and I think it strikes a really unique balance. And I think why I picked The Handmaiden out of all of his films, you know, I could have picked Old Boy, I could have picked his most recent movie, Decision to Leave, which is more of like a detective noir thriller thing.
Sure.
I think this is like the most Park Chan-Wook he's ever been in sort of like, I actually think he's a bit similar to Baz Luhrmann in that he always makes these large, opulent movies, and the camera's always moving everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's like very balletic, the camera movement.
And I don't think anyone else would let them get away with it if they weren't the ones writing it, producing it,
Absolutely.
bankrolling
yeah,
it.
it's crazy. Just some of the stuff in this movie, especially, is crazy. The old man who owns the house has a obsession with sort of like a certain type of literature that I really can't talk about here, but it's crazy. And that kind of gets to another thing about him. He's a very sensual filmmaker in that, like, if a character is feeling joy, it's like the most joy you've ever felt as a viewer. And if you're following a character who is like morally reprehensible, which are like 50% of the characters in this movie, you're like, this is the most disgusted I've ever been watching a movie in my entire life. But, you know, it's always counteracted with the sort of, his movies aren't all hopeful, but I think The Handmaiden is like his most hopeful movie in that it is about these two women trying to free themselves from this system, this largely patriarchal system. There's a really good quote from Park where he's like, in this movie, all the men are pathetic and they're all reprehensible. The only good men are like one or two babies. And I think that's a really good way to synthesize what he's trying to say with this movie in particular. I don't know, what did you think of The Handmaiden? I showed this to you for the first time, and this is your first Park Chan-Wook experience.
This is my first Park Chan-Wook experience. It was, again, so psychically damaging because Park Chan-Wook is one of our craziest guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he swings for the fences and it hits, but sometimes that ball flies really fast, and sometimes you get hit with the ball, and you pause at a part in the movie before the bad thing gets resolved, and you sort of sit in the sadness of it all for a long time, and it makes you go, isn't the world just awful? And then you like watch forward maybe 8 minutes, and suddenly you're like, I believe in love again, I believe in people,
Yeah.
I love people.
He's always like, it's sort of like, you know, Park Chan-Wook always has a plan for me. When you're watching his movies, it's sort of like he's always one step ahead of you, but once you start to catch on to that, it's just like so fun to watch where the story like plays out.
It's an interesting balance of like trust in the story to unfold
Absolutely.
in a nice way, where I think a lot of other filmmakers, like, it starts to go off the beaten path and you go, I don't like this, I don't want this, and it's probably going to be more of this. But when you're watching a Park Chan-Wook movie, it's very much a sit down.
Yeah.
You're going to be taken
You're going to
care
go
of.
on a roller coaster
He's going to
ride.
take care of you. You just need to relax.
Yeah, and it's like it deals a lot with perspective in that like the central relationship in this film is like a complete lie. So you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're waiting for, you know, this person to figure this out, and then you realize that they're they've known the entire time, maybe even. But yeah, The Handmaiden, it's a really great film. It's really awesome. You're gonna have to carve out an afternoon if you react to movies like my friend Asher over here. Or if you react to movies anyway, like, you don't have to be like my friend Asher. You can be normal.
So Jamie, what would you say you learned about directing from watching Mulan Rouge?
I would say, like, I don't think Baz Luhrmann and I have the same touch points, but I did learn to, like, don't be afraid to go big. You know, people are like, I think the usual credo is, like, don't be afraid to make it small, but I think watching his films, it's just, like, something that emotionally intelligent coming from being on such a big canvas is so, like, inspiring to me, and I think that, yeah, it just, like, taking risks and seeing where it pans out.
So much of it is what other people would sort of be disgusted by in any other sense, but then, I don't know, it won.
Like,
It got
there's
nominated
a lot
for 8
of
Academy Awards,
yeah, it's
won
one
2.
it's one of the strangest movies, I think. It's been nominated for Best Picture.
Very bizarre.
Yeah. What would you say you learned from watching The Handmaiden?
I learned there's a certain way to trust your directors, in that a lot of the storytelling can be so personal and can be so shot so close up that you sort of do miss the broader idea of it, but you've got to learn to, like, recognize that it is still there. There is still something under you to take care of you.
Yeah. He's the guy who doesn't really, like, hold your hand, but but you're on the same page with him. He's probably a few pages ahead, but you know what he's doing, and you know that you're going to be taken care of as a viewer, and that's what I think is so important about why he's, like, one of my favorite filmmakers personally.
And I think as a director, you can learn not to be scared to sort of, like, trail them along and don't leave them hanging, but also cut them some slack.
Yeah.
They'll get there when they get there, even if you're a couple steps ahead.
Yeah, just trust your audience, really.
Yeah.
That's what I like about that guy the most. He trusts me as a viewer.
I trust you.
I'll have to think about it for you.
That's going to do it for In the Scenes. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and TikTok at SGTV and at USC.
To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv@usc.com. For SGTV, I'm Jamie Bass.
And I'm Asher Thompson. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great night, Carolina.
Forever to thee.